I'm not gonna lie, I'm nervous. If anybody hasn't stood up here, it's a little bit nerve-wracking. I can't see your faces. All I see are a bunch of bright lights. But I know that you can see mine. So thank you so much for letting me be here today. My name is Melissa Gilliam, and I am right now working as an integrated marketing manager for the CSK Group, which is a strategic marketing agency in Colorado Springs, Colorado. That's my little shout out for the company who let me be here today to speak to you guys. I am from a small town in rural Missouri, though. I have a blog called A Small Town Girl's Guide to Life, and I started that blog in 2009 when I made the decision to leave my brownstone apartment in the heart of Brooklyn, New York, to move into a one-room cabin in the woods 12 miles outside of a town of 2,000 people in Smalltown, Missouri. So I grew up in a town of about 15,000 people called Farmington, Missouri. I graduated with about 250 people from high school, and I was one of a small number of those people who decided to go off to college out of state. So I went to Louisiana for undergrad, and the 10 years after that, between the time that I went off to college and the time that I moved back home to rural Missouri, were a whirlwind. I earned 2 undergraduate degrees. I marched with the world-class drum and bugle corps for a couple of years. I went on to earn my master's degree from Carnegie Mellon University, which is a pretty tough program, the one that I graduated from. I went on to study Chinese language skills at Cornell University, and then I moved to Taipei, Taiwan for a year. By the time I was 26 years old, I had traveled through 18 countries on my own. I am not a silver spoon kid. Mommy and Daddy did not pay for my trip. This is something I did myself. I earned my way. I had traveled through 18 countries. I had built quite a career for myself, and I had landed a job in a prominent cultural institution in Brooklyn, New York. So that's where I was when I was 26 years old. Let me tell you, I loved Brooklyn. When I got there, I felt like that I had finally found a world where the pace of life was the same pace at which I lived my own life. It was as if there was this treadmill that was running and I was set down on it, and it just fit. My feet already moved at the same speed that that treadmill did. I loved the diversity of the world around me. I loved that when I walked down the street, I heard a different language every 5 steps. I had neighbors who were Russian and Chinese. I had people in my office who were from Moldova. I had people from all over the world, all around me all the time, and I loved that. I loved the grittiness and the dirtiness of the city. I loved how competent I felt when I finally learned the subway system well enough that I could go around New York without having to stop and ask for directions. I felt like I earned my way into that city. It wasn't easy. I loved it. I made great friends. That was the place that felt the most like home to me of anywhere I had ever lived. So in March of 2009, when I was given a job offer to work as the marketing director for one of the largest YMCA camp and conference centers in the United States, YMCA Trout Lodge in Camp Lakewood in Potosi, Missouri, I thought I was crazy for even considering it, because let me tell you, my life in New York was just about everything I had ever wanted, I thought. I kind of wrote off the decision to move to Missouri as a good professional choice, which it was. I got a lot of really, really good hands-on experience. The Y was a great place for me to work. But deep down, I think that somewhere in my heart, I knew that I had a lot to learn from small-town Missouri. It's where I grew up. My values came from there. That's where my parents were, well, that's where my dad is from. My mom is a city girl. She's from Chicago, but my dad grew up on a farm in southeast Missouri. And I knew that a big part of me, of who I was and who I wanted to be later in life, had something to do with Missouri that I didn't quite know how the pieces fit. So I took the biggest leap of faith. I left New York City. I left that brownstone apartment. I moved to Potosi, Missouri, into my little one-room cabin in the woods, and I started my blog, A Small Town Girl's Guide to Life in Smalltown, Missouri. Let me back up. I didn't actually start the blog then. I started the blog in 2007 when I moved to New York City, thinking that I would write about what it was like to live in New York City as a small-town girl. But like Jeff said when he opened this session up today, most people are from small towns. So what I found was that my story wasn't unique. Everybody I met in New York was from someplace else. Nobody's from a town as big as New York City. It's like the biggest town in the world, right? So everybody's from someplace smaller. My story was just like everybody else's. Nobody cared. It was when I moved back to Missouri that I realized that I had something that not many other people had. I came back at 26 years old. I came back to Missouri having traveled through those 18 countries, having earned 3 degrees, speaking some Mandarin Chinese, having a slew of passport stamps, having friends around the world. But do you know what the most valuable thing I came back with was? I came back with perspective. I came back understanding that there was something in small town Missouri that was important. I couldn't tell you then what it was. I tried to pretend like I knew all the answers, because when you're 26 and you're leaving New York to move to the cabin in the woods of Missouri, you better act like you know what you're talking about. But I didn't really know. I knew I was willing to explore it. I knew that I wanted to tell stories. I knew that there was something about Missouri that I loved. And so that's when I really started the blog. I'd technically had it for a couple of years, but I really started writing. I explored small towns. I went out to the tiniest places, towns of 40 or 50 people, and I said, what's here? There's something interesting everywhere. There's something interesting in every person in this room. If I had enough time to sit down and talk to every one of you, we would find so many things that we have in common, whether they're things about our families, things about our backgrounds, experiences that we've had. I guarantee you, Shelley just stood up here and opened up to us that she's had a life experience that was horrible, that no one should go through, but I guarantee you she's not the only woman in the room who's experienced this. We all have things in common. And I think that when I moved back to Smalltown, Missouri, and I started that blog and I started exploring what there was there, what I found was that people all over the country and actually all over the world were interested in what stories were coming out of my tiny Missouri towns. So what I challenge you to do is hopefully to come away from this event today, but also from my talk today, ready to find that beauty, the wonder, the things that are interesting, the things that we have in common with one another, and share those. Technology is a huge tool. I have about 3 minutes left. I'm going to double check my notes here because I know that there are a couple of things I wanted to talk about that I've missed. So when I moved to Missouri, one of the things that I had kind of hoped, I was curious about social media. If you think back to where Twitter was, in March of 2009, it wasn't like it is now. Everybody wasn't on it. So when I got on Twitter, I thought, well, maybe I'll use this as a way to sort of stay in touch with some of my friends in New York. Maybe I can use technology to, you can live in the middle of rural Missouri now and you can get Netflix. So you can watch indie films, you can watch documentaries. You don't have to drive to the nearest town to buy a CD. You can download music online. So I thought, I'll stay connected to the news. I'll get New York Times home delivery or read it online. I'll stay connected to the arts however I can. I will talk to my friends in New York, but what I also found was that St. Louis, Missouri has an incredible social media network. And I almost immediately made friends. Before I even got to Missouri, I had already connected with people who couldn't wait to meet me when I got there, and vice versa. And so I started out using social media as kind of an experiment to see if I could stay connected to all those big city ideas that I didn't want to lose when I moved to small-town Missouri. I didn't want to lose my big city sass when I moved away. And what I found instead was there was this whole world waiting for me there that was waiting to embrace me. Now, the newest twist in my world with social media and technology and staying connected to people is that about a year ago, I actually met my now fiance through Facebook. A classmate of mine from high school, who I had reconnected with a few years ago, introduced us. And at the time, he was deployed to Iraq. He is an officer in the US Army. And so we came to know each other through Facebook, and then we started to email each other, and then we started using Google Chat a little bit, and then phone calls, and then we finally met. We fell in love, we got engaged, and I just left rural Missouri to move to Colorado Springs to be with him. The next step in our lives will require us to use technology and social media in new ways to make sure that our relationship can sustain a deployment to Afghanistan next year. So we'll be using Skype, we'll be using email, we'll be using whatever we can, digital photo sharing, to make sure that we stay connected and that we continue to hold on to those things that we have in common when our lives are going two very different directions, as I'm pursuing my career in marketing in Colorado Springs and holding down the fort at home while he's off in Afghanistan, theoretically defending our country, depending on where your politics stand, right? I'm very proud of him, and I know that what he's going to be doing is going to be dangerous. Our lives will be taking us in two different directions, but we're counting on that technology to help us continue to find those middle grounds, to continue to share our stories with one another. If we can do that, if we can stay connected through his deployment, if I can move from Brooklyn, New York, to live in a one-room cabin in the woods 12 miles from the nearest town of 2,000 people in rural Missouri, 75 miles from St. Louis, which by a New Yorker standard is a small town. If I can do that, and I can build a career writing about those things, I've been published now in a number of magazines. That was a dream come true. I speak now at conferences like this one. That's a dream come true. If moving back to rural Missouri and using technology and social media has helped me achieve those dreams on a professional level, it's helped me meet the man that I'm going to spend my life with,
If I can use those tools and I can find the beauty and the wonder in my life and I can share it with other people, then you can do the same thing. So I hope that whatever it is that you find beautiful and that you find wondrous in your world, in your life, no matter how big or small the town is you live in, or whatever place you're in life, because place is literal and it can also be figurative, right? I hope that you use these tools to continue to share your story and find those common grounds that we can all share. So thank you very much for letting me speak today and for encouraging me as I got over my nerves when I first stood up here. Thank you very much.